Aris, I'm gonna be real with you. I almost lost it this morning. I'm sitting in the hover transit, right? And I look at this kid across from me. He's maybe 20. He's got AR glasses flashing stock tickers. He's thumbing through a micro-learning app on his haptic sleeve. And he's trying to eat a protein bar. He looked hollow, like his brain was just a flickering screen with no one behind the eyes.
It's heartbreaking, Jax, truly. What you're describing isn't just busyness, it's neural hemorrhaging. That young man's prefrontal cortex, the very part of his brain that makes him him, was essentially gasping for air. We've built a world in 2026 that treats human attention like an infinite natural resource, but biologically, it's a finite, fragile battery.
Exactly. We're out here trying to build Life 2.0 while our hardware is still stuck in the Stone Age. Cal Newport warned us about this a decade ago, but now, with the always-on neural pings, if you can't drop into deep work, you're just a glorified data processor. You're replaceable. And that scares the hell out of people, Aris. I see the anxiety in my clients' eyes every day.
And they should be concerned, but not hopeless. First, we have to accept that our brains weren't wired for this hyper-connected static. Subsequently, we have to understand the chemistry. When you focus intensely, you trigger myelin. It's this beautiful fatty sheath that wraps around your neurons like high-grade insulation. It makes your thoughts faster, sharper. But the moment you check a notification, you leak that energy. You create attention residue.
It's like trying to run a marathon but stopping every 50 yards to check your mail. You never get the momentum. You never hit that flow state. All right, let's get into the trenches. I want to talk about case study 1 because this one actually made me angry for her. So I'm consulting for this lead AI ethicist, Sarah. She's brilliant, okay? She's responsible for auditing swarm networks, these massive interconnected AI clusters that run the city's logistics. If she misses a logic flaw, the whole grid could develop a bias that ruins lives. No pressure, right?
The cognitive load of that job is immense. She has to hold thousands of variables in her working memory simultaneously. That's peak deep work territory.
Right? But her company has this open sync policy. Her wristband was vibrating every 30 seconds with urgent pings from developers. Her AR HUD was a Christmas tree of red alerts. When I met her, Aris, she was shaking. She told me, "Jax, I feel like I'm losing my mind. I can't think a single complete thought anymore." She actually started crying in my office. It wasn't fatigue, it was the grief of losing her own intellect.
That's a very real physiological reaction, Jax. When the amygdala, the brain's fear center, is constantly spiked by those pings, it hijacks the prefrontal cortex. She wasn't thinking, she was in survival mode. Her brain was literally drowning in cortisol.
So we went nuclear. I told her, "Sarah, we're reclaiming your sovereignty." First, we stripped the tech. We turned off the haptics, killed the HUD, and I moved her workstation to what I call the dead zone, a lead-lined room in the basement. No signal, pure silence.
Oh, the monastic approach. Subsequently, her brain would have started that painful defragging process. The first few hours must have been brutal for her.
Oh, she hated me for 2 days. She felt phantom pings on her wrist. That's the dopamine loop screaming for a fix. But by day 3, the clouds cleared. She came out of that basement with a 40-page audit that caught a cascading logic error no one else saw. She looked 10 years younger.
Ultimately, she allowed her neurons to finally fire in a clean, uninterrupted sequence. She grew that myelin. She wasn't fighting attention residue anymore. She was operating at her true biological potential.
And she set the boundary. She sent an auto-reply to the whole dev team. It was beautiful. She wrote, "To protect the integrity of the audit and ensure the safety of the grid, I am going offline to focus on the swarm architecture. I am unreachable until 4 p.m. Do not interrupt this block unless the building is literally on fire."
I love it. Unless the building is literally on fire. That's not just a boundary. That's a neuroprotective shield.
It's the only way to survive, Aris. Now, are you ready to talk about the remote surgeon in case study 2? Because that's where the deep work becomes a literal matter of life and death. All right, Aris, take a breath, because case study 2 is where the deep work philosophy stops being about productivity and starts being about a heartbeat. Meet Dr. Elias. He's a world-class pediatric neurosurgeon based in Zurich. But here's the 2026 twist. He's operating on a 5-year-old in a field clinic in the Andes. He's using haptic telepresence gloves and a 6G neural link.
The technical precision required for that it's staggering, Jax. You're talking about manipulating blood vessels thinner than a human hair through a digital interface. The prefrontal cortex has to stay in a state of absolute, unwavering high-fidelity focus. Any flicker in his attention isn't just a mistake, it's a catastrophe.
Exactly. But Elias was working in this state-of-the-art hospital. Glass walls everywhere, people walking by, digital status boards in the hallway flashing shift changes. And the worst part, his UD, the very screen he uses to see the patient, was still connected to the hospital's internal comms. He told me that halfway through a delicate brainstem bypass, a notification popped up in the corner of his eye. It was a reminder for a mandatory wellness seminar at 2 p.m. Can you believe that irony?
Oh, Jax, that makes my skin crawl. That's a neural hijack. Even if he ignores the notification, his brain has already performed a context switch. First, his neurons were mapped to the patient's anatomy. Subsequently, the notification forced a search and orient response. Even a 200-millisecond distraction creates attention residue that lingers for minutes. He's essentially performing surgery through a mental fog of wellness pings.
He told me he felt his hands shake for a second. Just a second. The emotion in his voice when he called me, he sounded broken, Aris. He said, "Jax, I almost killed a child because of a calendar invite." He felt this crushing sense of professional betrayal. The system that was supposed to help him was actually sabotaging his cognitive load.
It's a systemic failure. We're treating the human brain like it has infinite bandwidth, but it has massive latency issues when it's distracted. If his amygdala spikes because of the stress of that interruption, the fine motor control in his hands, which is governed by the motor cortex, loses its deep synchronization.
So we re-engineered his environment into a deep hub. We treated it like a fighter jet cockpit. First, we installed smart glass that frosts over the moment he starts a procedure. Total visual isolation. Subsequently, we bypassed the hospital network entirely for his UD. Nothing gets through but the surgical feed. Ultimately, we introduced binaural beats set to a specific 40 Hz gamma frequency to lock him into a permanent flow state.
I love that. Gamma waves are like a metronome for the brain. They keep all the different neural regions firing in perfect harmony. It reduces the effort required to stay deep and protects the myelin pathways from being interrupted by external static.
The transformation was incredible. He went back to the board and laid down the law. He told them, "To ensure the best patient outcome, I am carving out a deep hub block. During my surgical windows, my feed is locked to the procedure. I am unavailable for pings, updates, or seminars. My focus is the patient's life, and that requires a total blackout."
That's the vocabulary of a man who respects his biology. He's not being difficult, he's being a protector of human focus. It's the ultimate act of care.
If a surgeon has to fight that hard to stay deep in 2026, what does that say about the rest of us? We're all performing surgery on our own lives every day, and we're letting every pain cut us open. Jax, I want to pivot to something a bit more environmental. Let's talk about case study 3, the climate architect. Because this isn't just about 1-hour blocks, it's about the bimodal lifestyle. Are you ready? Case study 3, Aris. This one hits different. I want to talk about Marcus. He's a climate architect. In 2026, that's not just a job, it's a burden. He's designing these massive, carbon-neutral urban lungs for cities that are literally suffocating. He's got the weight of the future on his shoulders, and he was failing.
I remember his intake charts, Jax. His baseline cortisol levels were through the roof. He wasn't just tired, he was experiencing moral injury. He felt that every minute he spent answering a mundane email was a minute he wasn't saving a coastline.
Exactly. He was trapped in the shallows. He had 50 different stakeholder threads. Politicians, engineers, activists, all screaming for quick updates. He told me, Jax, I sit at my desk and I just stare at the screen. I have these brilliant visions for these structures, but the moment I try to draw, a notification for a sync up pops up and the vision just evaporates. He looked at me, Aris, and he actually had tears in his eyes. He said, I feel like I'm losing my soul to 1,000 tiny pings.
That's the death of neuroplasticity in real time. When you never reach the deep, you never engage the higher order synthesis needed for genuine innovation. First, his brain was being kept in a state of hypervigilance. Subsequently, the constant task switching prevented any significant myelin growth in his design circuits. Ultimately, he was just a shell of an architect, reacting instead of creating.
So we didn't just tweak his schedule. We went bimodal. This is the Newport hardcore move. I told him, Marcus, you're going to be two different people. First, we split his week. 4 days a week, he's the architect. He goes to a remote cabin in the woods, no signal, no satellite, no pings. Just him, a drafting board, and a high-spec offline workstation.
And the other 3 days?
The grid days. He comes back to the city. He's 100% available. He does the meetings, the emails, the sync-ups. But those 4 days in the woods, those are sacred. He told me the first time he did it, the silence was so loud it actually made him dizzy. That's the attention residue finally draining out of his system, right?
Exactly. It takes about 24 hours for the brain to defrag after weeks of distraction. But once it does, the prefrontal cortex finally gets the metabolic resources it needs. He's no longer fighting for air. He's breathing.
He came back from his first deep block with a breakthrough for the Jakarta seawall that saved 3 years of projected construction. 3 years! He told me he felt like he had re-inherited his own brain. He sent this out to his stakeholders. To ensure the best output for this project, I am adopting a bimodal schedule. I am going offline to focus on the core engineering from Monday through Thursday. I will be back on the grid and fully available for sync-ups on Friday. Please respect the blackout.
It sounds like he reclaimed his life, Jax.
He did. But Aris, it's a constant battle. The world hates it when you go dark. They feel entitled to your attention. It takes a lot of guts to tell a politician no so you can actually do the work they hired you for.
It's not just guts, Jax. It's biological survival. If we don't protect our deep hubs, we won't have the solutions we need to survive this century.
Speaking of survival, let's talk about case study 4, the data journalist. She's fighting deepfakes in a world where the truth changes every 15 seconds. Aris, how does a brain handle reality fatigue? Case study 4. This one is for anyone who feels like they're losing their grip on reality. I want to talk about Maya. She's a data journalist in 2026. Think about that for a second. Her job is to verify deepfakes and synthetic truths in a 24/7 news cycle where the facts change faster than a Neuralink update.
Yeah, Maya is living in a state of information overload, Jax. When you're constantly scanning for fakes, your brain stays in a state of permanent hyperarousal. It's like being a soldier in a war zone where you can't see the enemy, but you know they're everywhere.
It was a wreck, Aris. She told me she felt jittery all the time. She'd be at dinner with her family and she'd see a video on a screen across the room and her brain would start automatically running verification algorithms. She couldn't turn it off. She told me, Jax, I feel like my brain is just a jagged piece of glass. Everything I touch, I break. She felt so isolated. She felt like she was the only one who could see the static in the world.
That's cognitive load pushing past the breaking point. First, her brain was struggling to maintain a coherent truth map. Subsequently, because she never gave her prefrontal cortex a rest, she was suffering from decision fatigue. Ultimately, her ability to tell fact from fiction was actually degrading because her neurons were just fried.
So we didn't go monastic with her. She couldn't afford to disappear for days. We went rhythmic. I told her, Maya, we're going to build a truth fortress in the morning. First, she spends the first 4 hours of her day completely disconnected. No feeds, no breaking alerts, no pings. Just her, a high-spec local database, and her own intuition.
The rhythmic approach is beautiful for high-intensity roles. It creates a predictable, deep cycle. By front-loading her focus in the morning, she's utilizing her brain's peak metabolic energy before the dopamine storm of the news cycle hits.
And the emotional shift? It was like watching a wilted plant get water. She told me that after a week, she actually remembered what it felt like to have a solid thought. She wasn't just reacting to the lies, she was building the truth. But she had to be brutal with her boundaries. She set her status to, I am in a deep verification block. To ensure the accuracy of the morning report, I will be offline and unreachable until 1 p.m. If a story is breaking, it can wait 4 hours for the truth.
It can wait 4 hours for the truth. That's such a powerful line, Jax. It challenges the 2026 obsession with instant over accurate.
It's about reclaiming the speed of thought, Aris. If we let the algorithm set the pace, we lose our humanity. Maya isn't just a journalist anymore. She's a gatekeeper for reality, and you can't guard the gate if you're distracted by the noise. Now, let's talk about the people building the very world we're living in. Case Study 5, the software engineer. She's managing context switching in a global dev cycle that literally never sleeps. Aris, how do we fix a brain that's been overclocked for too long? Case Study 5. Aris, this one hits home for me because I used to be in those shoes. Meet Elena. She's a senior software engineer at one of the big 5 tech hubs. She's responsible for the core architecture of the global logistics grid. We're talking millions of lines of code that keep the 2026 supply chains moving. If she glitches, the world's grocery shelves go empty.
The pressure. It's not just mental, Jax, it's physical. I looked at Elena's biometrics before she started your program. Her resting heart rate was at marathon levels while she was just sitting at her desk. Her brain was effectively overclocked, running at maximum capacity 24/7 without any cooling system.
And the culture there? It was toxic agile on steroids. Constant scrum pings, quick syncs, and the global dev cycle that meant she was getting messages from Tokyo at 2 a.m. and Berlin at 9 a.m. She told me, Jax, I feel like a CPU that's being throttled. I have all this processing power, but I'm spending 90% of it just switching between tasks. She was burnt out, Aris. She told me she'd sit in her car after work and just cry for 20 minutes because she couldn't remember the last time she'd solved a hard problem.
That's the context switching trap. First, her brain has to load the schema for one problem. Subsequently, a ping forces her to flush that cache and load a new one. Ultimately, she's never actually executing code. She's just perpetually loading. It's the most inefficient way to use human neurons. It destroys the myelin development needed for complex system thinking.
Exactly. She felt like she was becoming a shallow engineer. So we did a system reboot. We didn't just give her a schedule, we gave her a focus fortress protocol. First, we negotiated a zero ping window with her global team, 4 hours where her status was hard locked. Subsequently, we moved her dev environment to a standalone machine. No browser, no email, just the compiler and the code.
I remember the data from her first deep week. It was fascinating. Her prefrontal cortex activity stabilized. The neural noise dropped off a cliff. For the first time in years, she was hitting a state of flow that lasted more than 10 minutes. She was finally allowing her brain to reach the theta wave state, where deep creativity actually happens.
She told me that after day 4, she solved a threading issue that had been bugging the team for 6 months. She did it in 2 hours of deep work. 2 hours. She was so emotional when she called me, Aris. She said, I'm not a robot, Jax. I'm a craftsman again. She set her status message to something that actually became a template for her whole department. To ensure the stability of the core architecture, I am going offline to focus on deep-level dev. I am unreachable for pings or syncs until 3 p.m. If a story is breaking, please log all issues in the tracker for my afternoon review.
She reclaimed her agency. In 2026, saying, "I am unreachable," is the ultimate act of professional self-respect.
It really is. But man, the world doesn't make it easy. Speaking of which, let's talk about the creators. Case study 6, the digital artist. How do you stay creative when the AI is trying to outrun you every second? Aris, let's talk about the sacred space and the dopamine loop triggers.
Case study 6, Aris. This one, it gets to the heart of what it means to be human in 2026. Let's talk about Leo. He's a digital artist, one of the greats, but he was falling into a dark place. He was trying to compete with generative AI, trying to match its speed, its volume. He was churning out pieces every hour, chasing the algorithm on social feeds, and he was losing his soul.
I saw his creative biomarkers, Jax. They were flat. When you create purely for engagement, you're tapping into the dopamine loop, not the creative centers of the brain. His prefrontal cortex was being bypassed by the striatum, the part of the brain that just wants that quick like or share hit. He wasn't an artist anymore. He was a slot machine addict.
He told me he hated everything he made. He'd look at a canvas and just see content. He actually said to me, "Jax, if a machine can do this in 3 seconds, why am I even breathing?" He was in a full-blown existential crisis. He was ready to delete his portfolio and just walk away.
That's the shallow work trap for creatives. First, the brain becomes addicted to the external validation of the ping. Subsequently, the neural pathways for deep, slow, symbolic thinking begin to atrophy. We call it synaptic pruning of the creative spark. Ultimately, the artist feels empty because they aren't achieving flow, that state where time disappears and the self merges with the work.
So we performed a sacred space exorcism. First, we built him a sacred space. We took a physical studio and stripped it of every screen that had an internet connection. He had a tablet for drawing, but it was air-gapped. Total isolation. Subsequently, we set a slow art rule. 1 piece per week. No more, no less.
The sacred space is vital because it removes cues. If your brain sees a phone, it thinks notifications. If it sees a blank offline wall, it thinks creation. By limiting his output, you forced his myelin to build around quality and complex composition again, rather than speed.
The first 3 days, he just sat there and stared at the wall. He was shaking from the digital detox. But on day 4, he started painting this mural that was so complex, so human, that no AI could have dreamt it up. It had layers of emotion that only come from deep focus. He came out of that studio looking like he'd been to a spiritual retreat. He updated his bio and his auto-reply to, "I am currently in a sacred space block to focus on human-centric creation. I do not engage with feeds or pings during the work week. To ensure the depth of my art, I am offline until Saturday."
Human-centric creation. I love that. He reclaimed the one thing the AI doesn't have, the ability to suffer for a masterpiece.
Exactly. But Aris, the world doesn't just want art, it wants security. Let's look at case study 7, the cybersecurity lead. This is where deep work becomes a shield against the dark net of 2026. How do you stay focused when the crisis is literally your job description? Rubbing his temples, the sound of a heavy coffee mug clinking at the table. Case study 7, Aris. This one is intense. Let's talk about Sarah. Not the ethicist from earlier, but Sarah Kay, a cybersecurity lead for a major financial node. In 2026, a breach isn't just a leaked password. It's a coordinated AI strike on the life savings of millions. When the alarms go off, the noise is deafening.
I can only imagine the amygdala response there, Jax. In a crisis like that, the brain's fight-or-flight system isn't just a whisper, it's a siren. The adrenaline alone is enough to shut down any chance of deep thinking.
Exactly.
Sarah told me that during a major zero-day attack, she had 15 different screens flashing red, 3 different war room voice feeds screaming in her ear, and her CEO literally standing over her asking for an ETA. She said, "Jax, I could see the code on the screen, but I couldn't read it. My eyes were moving, but my brain was just static." She felt a total loss of control. She felt like she was watching the world burn and she'd forgotten how to use a fire extinguisher.
That's a classic neural lock. First, the brain is hit with too much sensory input. Subsequently, the prefrontal cortex, which she needs for the complex logic of debugging, is starved of oxygen because the body is diverting all resources to the heart and lungs for survival. Ultimately, her cognitive scope narrows so much that she can't see the solution right in front of her.
We had to build her a crisis protocol based on deep work principles. I told her, when the alarm hits, you don't speed up, you slow down. We implemented the triage method. First, she spends 60 seconds of tactical breathing to calm the amygdala. Subsequently, she activates the iron dome, a physical switch that mutes all communications except for the raw data feed. She isolates herself completely.
It's counterintuitive, isn't it? In a crisis, everyone thinks you should be more connected, but for her brain to find the pattern in the attack, she needs a deep hub. She needs to allow those myelin-heavy analytical circuits to fire without the interference of a screaming CEO.
Exactly. The first time she did it, the CEO almost fired her on the spot for ignoring him. But 10 minutes later, she found the backdoor the AI was using and shut it down. She did it in 10 minutes what a connected team couldn't do in 3 hours. Now her team knows the rule. When Sarah goes dark, it's because she's saving the ship. She actually has a preset emergency status. I am isolating to analyze the breach pattern. To ensure the security of the node, I am offline to all voice and text pings. I will provide a status update in 20 minutes. Do not breach the deep hub unless the servers are physically melting.
I love the physically melting part. It's about setting a boundary that even a panicked executive can understand.
It saved her career, Aris, and it saved the bank. But it takes a lot of emotional armor to tell the world to shut up when it's screaming for help. Speaking of armor, let's look at the future of our youth. Case Study 8, the academic researcher. How do you write a PhD when your brain has been raised on 15-second video clips? Aris, let's talk about monastic deep work for the next generation. Case Study 8, Aris. This one is personal. We're talking about the lost generation. Let's talk about Kai. He's a PhD candidate in 2026, researching sustainable synthetic biology. The kid is a literal genius, but he grew up in the era of the microburst. He's a victim of a world that taught his brain to seek a hit of dopamine every 15 seconds.
Kai is the canary in the coal mine, Jax. He's spent his entire developmental life in a state of continuous partial attention. His brain is wired for breadth, not depth. When he tries to sit down to synthesize a 1,000-page dataset, his prefrontal cortex literally starts to itch. It's a neurological withdrawal.
He came to me in tears, Aris. Total breakdown. He said, "Jax, I can't read a paper for more than 5 minutes without my hand reaching for my haptic sleeve. I feel like my intelligence is a Ferrari with no steering wheel." He was terrified he was going to fail his thesis, not because he wasn't smart enough, but because he couldn't stay anywhere long enough to think.
It's a neural decay. First, his striatum, the reward center, has become so dominant that it suppresses the focus circuits. Subsequently, the myelin that should be insulating his long-form thinking pathways is thinning out from disuse. Ultimately, he's experiencing cognitive boredom, which the brain interprets as physical pain.
So we didn't just give him a timer. We went monastic. I told him, "Kai, we're going to rebuild your brain from the ground up." We sent him to a digital monastery. No devices, no internet, not even a digital watch for 30 days. Just physical books, a pen, and a paper journal.
That's the most aggressive deep work protocol there is. The first week must have been a nightmare for his dopamine loop.
He told me he spent the first 3 days just pacing his room like a caged animal. He was sweating, Aris. Actual physical detox. But by week 2, he started noticing the texture of his thoughts again. He told me, "Jax, I'm seeing connections in the biology that I haven't seen in years." He was finally allowing his prefrontal cortex to take the wheel again.
He was regrowing his attention span. By removing the distractions, he allowed his neurons to fire in long, sustained sequences. That's how you build myelin. That's how you save a PhD.
He came back and finished his thesis in a 3-month monastic sprint. He even set a boundary protocol for his lab mates. He wore a red headband. When the headband was on, he was in the monastery. He told everyone, "I am practicing monastic deep work to finish the synthesis phase. I am going offline and will be unreachable for the next 6 hours. Do not break my concentration unless there is a chemical spill."
The red headband, a physical signal for a digital world. I love it.
It's about protecting the deep at all costs. But Aris, what about the people who have to build the experience of our world? Case study 9, the UX designer. How do you design for a distracted world without being distracted yourself? Let's talk about deep hub blocks and the emotional cost of creative empathy. Leaning in, tapping his haptic sleeve with a rhythmic, slightly impatient click. Case study 9, Aris. Let's talk about Chloe. She's a senior UX designer. Her entire job is to design the interfaces that you and I use to navigate this 2026 mess. But here's the irony. She's hired to make things seamless and user-friendly, but her own work life was a fragmented disaster. She was drowning in feedback loops.
The designer's paradox. To create an experience that feels focused for the user, the designer needs a massive amount of internal focus themselves. But in 2026, UX designers are treated like 24/7 help desks. They're constantly pulled into quick 5-minute reviews that turn into hour-long debates.
Exactly. Chloe told me she felt like she was designing by committee through 400 Slack pings a day. She said, "Jax, I'm supposed to be imagining how a human feels using this app, but I don't even know how I feel anymore. I'm just a pixel-pushing ghost." She was suffering from design fatigue. She'd look at a layout and her brain would literally shut down. She couldn't tell good from bad anymore because her prefrontal cortex was too tired to make a judgment call.
That's decision fatigue at its most toxic. First, every small design tweak she's asked for drains a little bit of her executive function, her brain's fuel. Subsequently, because she's never in the deep, she loses her empathic mapping, the ability to simulate another person's experience. Ultimately, her work becomes shallow and mechanical because she lacks the myelin-supported depth to see the big picture.
She was ready to quit. She told me, "If I have to change one more button color because of a vibe someone had on a thread, I'm deleting my cloud." So we built her a deep hub. I told her, "Chloe, your creativity is a high-voltage circuit. We need to insulate it." First, we created a sprint and shield schedule. 3 days of shielded design, no meetings, no feedback, just her and the canvas. Subsequently, the other 2 days were open hub for all the feedback and pings.
The shield is the key there. It gives the brain permission to stop scanning for social threats or critiques. It allows the amygdala to go dormant so the creative centers can truly expand. It's like giving a plant a greenhouse. It finally has the environment it needs to actually grow.
The results? She redesigned the entire HealthLink interface in one deep week, a project that had been stalled for 6 months. She sent a memo to her project managers that was cold as ice, but absolutely necessary. She wrote, "To protect the user experience and ensure the best creative output, I am carving out a deep hub block. From Tuesday to Thursday, I am offline to pings and quick reviews. I will address all feedback during my open hub on Friday. I am prioritizing deep focus over instant response."
Prioritizing deep focus over instant response. That should be the 2026 anthem, Jax. It's a rebellion against the right now culture.
It saved her sanity, Aris. But we've got one more, the top of the food chain. Case study 10, the executive coach. How do you lead a company when your own attention span has been decimated by neural implant fatigue? Aris, let's talk about the attention CEO and the final battle for the brain.
We've made it, Aris. The final stretch. Case study 10. This isn't about the engineers or the artists anymore. This is about the people at the very top. Let's talk about Marcus, a CEO of a global logistics firm. This guy is the definition of power. But when he walked into my office, he looked like a ghost. He was suffering from neural implant fatigue.
Marcus's case was a warning to us all, Jax. He had the latest direct link neural interface. He thought it would make him a god. Instead, it turned his brain into a 24-hour bus station. He was receiving data streams directly into his sensory cortex while trying to eat, sleep, and lead. His prefrontal cortex wasn't just tired, it was physically inflamed.
He told me, Jax, I have all the information in the world, but I can't make a single decision. I feel like I'm drowning in a shallow pool. He was losing the respect of his board because he was twitchy. During high-stakes negotiations, he'd get a stock alert ping directly in his visual field, and he'd lose his train of thought. He felt like he was losing his mind, Aris. He actually asked me, is this the end of being human?
It was the end of his cognitive sovereignty. First, the direct link created a state of constant neural noise. Subsequently, his brain's default mode network, the part that allows for reflection and long-term planning, was being completely suppressed by the external data stream. Ultimately, he lost his attention span, which is the foundation of leadership. Without focus, you aren't a leader, you're just a reaction machine.
So we did a neuro audit. It was the hardest thing he'd ever done. I told him, Marcus, if you want to save your company, you have to disconnect the link. We went for a total digital decoupling. First, we uninstalled the direct link implants. He had to learn how to live without the voices in his head again. Subsequently, we instituted a CEO sanctuary, 2 hours every morning where he sat in a room with a physical newspaper and a cup of coffee. No tech. Just thought.
The sanctuary saved him. By cutting the noise, he allowed his myelin to repair the pathways for deep synthesis. He began to think in decades again rather than seconds. His functional IQ actually stabilized, and that flicker in his eyes disappeared. He regained his presence.
He went back to his board and didn't apologize. He told them, I'm not a computer, I'm a strategist, and a strategist needs silence. He set the ultimate boundary for the entire corporation. To ensure the long-term vision of this company, I am practicing deep leadership. I am offline for strategic synthesis from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. daily. My neural link is disabled. I am unreachable for all but level 5 emergencies. If you want my best work, you must respect my silence.
And that, Jax, is the heart of the 2026 deep work revolution. It's not about doing more work. It's about doing better work by protecting the biological miracle that is the human brain.
That's it for today's session on the Synapse Lab. 10 lives, 10 battles for focus. Whether you're a surgeon, an artist, or a CEO, the message is the same. Your attention is your life. Don't let the shallows take it from you. Go deep or go home. 10 cases, Aris. 10 people who were basically drowning in the digital soup of 2026 until they grabbed the lifeline of deep work. It's heavy, isn't it? Realizing that our attention isn't just a productivity hack. It's our mental health. It's our ability to actually feel like a person.
It is heavy, Jax, but it's also incredibly empowering. We aren't victims of our tech unless we choose to be. When we choose to go deep, we are literally restructuring our brains. We are choosing myelin over cortisol. We are choosing a life of meaning over a life of pings. And seeing Marcus or Maya or Sarah reclaim that, it's why I do this work. It's about the survival of the human spirit in a machine-driven world.
I felt that. I really did. Look, to everyone listening out there, I know you're tired. I know your wrist is buzzing right now and you feel that phantom itch to check your feed. But listen to Aris. Listen to the science. Your brain is a masterpiece, but you have to be the one to guard the gallery.
Exactly. First, acknowledge the distraction. Subsequently, build your focus fortress. Ultimately, allow yourself the grace to be unreachable. The world won't fall apart because you went offline for 4 hours. In fact, that might be the only way you can actually help put it back together.
Well said, Doc. That's our time for today. Go deep, stay focused, and remember, in 2026, the most radical thing you can do is pay attention to one thing at a time. This has been the Synapse Lab.
Goodbye, everyone. Take care of your neurons.